Now, you have to, well, it's not a legal requirement, but you have to have somebody who manages the property while it's in the trust, and that's your trustee. They hold the legal title to the trust property. So in my silly example of the watch, you were the trustee because you were the one who controlled the trust property. You Laylee had to act in the best interest of Deborah, who was the beneficiary in that silly example, so she always had to use the watch for the benefit of Deborah. The trust fund ultimately belongs to the beneficiaries, but the trustees own and manage the control of the trust fund. So that's where you have the separation. So it's useful if child can't manage the assets on his or her own. You want to give the assets to the child for the benefit of the child, but you want somebody else to manage. That's a usual example. So again, the concept is trustee manages, beneficiary has ultimate ownership, but the beneficiary can't tell the trustee what to do. The trustee looks at the trust document and says, this is what I'm able to do, this is the scope of my authority, I make the decisions. I can consult with the beneficiary and find out what the beneficiary's needs are, what the beneficiary would like me to do, but I make the ultimate decision as to what to do with the trust property. So again, it's self-contained, it's not part of the estate on death because it's in this little self-contained thing. Okay, anything that I missed on that?
I think for me what's useful when I started learning about trusts when I was in law school is to think about a trust for me as a relationship or a set of relationships. So when I have something, an asset let's say, and I'm thinking about someone that I want that asset to benefit, I have a relationship with that person, right? My child. I care about them. I want them taken care of. And I want this thing that I have, this property that I have, to go to them, but maybe I want it to last through the future because of the relationship that I have with that person. So I say, Blair, I trust you because of the relationship that we have. So I'm going to give you the thing that's maybe worth a lot of money, this particular piece of property, my house, a rental property that I own that generates income for me. But I have this relationship with my child, and I want them to be okay for as long as they possibly can be. So Blair, I'm giving you this thing that I have, this asset, this property that's worth whatever, and then it's not mine anymore. That's the thing about a trust, right? So that's why we're saying it doesn't, that property that I gave to the trustee is no longer mine. So this is an important concept. And it's no longer mine because of two different relationships. One that I have with my child that I want to protect, and one that I have with the trustee who I know is going to protect my child. And they're going to use that property that I give them to protect my child. So this is a very useful legal concept, and it's weird because it's a thing, it's a real thing, but it's also this set of relationships really is what it is. And when I give Blair that property that's really valuable to me, that's going to help my child in the future, he now has a responsibility at law to use that property. Although I've given it to him, legal title is his. He owns that property now. My child doesn't own it. I don't own it. He owns it at law, but he has responsibilities at law. And those responsibilities are all enshrined in this magical document that's called a trust deed. So that deed is really important. That's where I get my intention in there and all that stuff that we were talking about. And I set out the beneficiaries as well in that deed. They're named, or maybe they're a broad group like we talked about, and why you might want to have a broad group. We talked about that as well, right? So that's all in that deed. I say, here, Blair, here's the trust property. Please do all of these things for my child. This is important to me. This is what I intend. Okay, so then that's these relationships that are going on, right? And then he holds the trust property, and he now has a relationship with the child, right? Because he's committed. He's also signed the trust deed. So when you appoint someone as a trustee, they have to agree to be a trustee, because this is a huge responsibility. So he's taken on that responsibility. He now has a relationship with the child, and he's obliged at law to take care of them and to use that trust property for their benefit. Not for mine anymore. Again, not my property anymore. It's his at law, but he has a responsibility to use it only for that child's benefit. So that's how I like to think about trust. I'm not sure if that's helpful at all for you, but I hope it is. It's about a series of relationships and the way that we interact and how we can use this fantastic legal concept that's actually unique to our country and several other common law countries. Other places don't have it. Because it's a really, really powerful concept and set of relationships that we can take advantage of and formalize with this trust deed.
Mm-hmm. So it's easier to see in the death context, because if I die, I can't manage the assets anyway. So if my will might set up a trust for the benefit of my disabled child, because disabled child can't manage the assets either. So my will says, okay, trustee, you're going to manage the assets for the benefit of my disabled child. It's easiest to see in that context, but you can set it up during your lifetime too. If there was an asset that you wanted to set up for a child, you could do that during your lifetime as well.
We'll
get into that later.
Yeah.
So because, and the crucial thing about a trustee is we can set it up legally, but the important thing is who is the trustee? Who is going to do the managing of this asset? Because you're asking somebody to have control of an asset and not use it for the benefit of that person. So you've got to have somebody who knows your beneficiary, ideally, has empathy for your beneficiary, knows what you're trying to accomplish, has the ability. Now, they don't have to be a tax expert. They don't have to be an investment expert. They're the expert on the beneficiary and your relationship with the beneficiary. And you want to have somebody with good judgment who can hire helpers, advisors, professionals, investment advisors, somebody who knows when the investment advisor is doing an okay job, who can stay away from people who are making weird investments, stay away from charlatans. But you're relying on that person's judgment as a judge of character, really, because they can always hire advisors to do the tax return and to do the investments. You're really picking somebody who is a surrogate for you, actually. Somebody that would make the decisions that you make. They don't have to have technical expertise. It's more of a value relationship. Do they share your values? Are they going to deal with your child in the way that you would deal with your child? So it's now there are pros and cons of who you pick. Family or friends, they have intimate family knowledge. They know the family history. They are often dedicated to family members. But the cons are sometimes they're indecisive. Sometimes there's family history that is a problem, sibling rivalry, and they might play favorites. There are all sorts of factors that you have to think about. Mm-hmm. And there's no perfect situation, so you think about those factors and make the decisions based on what's available. You can have professional trustees, trust companies. They're professional, which can be an advantage. They're dispassionate. They know the technical things. They're not emotionally involved. That can be a good thing and that can be a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Because, and again, trust companies are usually entities, so the really important thing is who in that trust company are you dealing with, and that can change over time. The corporation itself never dies, but people handling the file come and go. There may be a high staff turnover. They may be too conservative because again they're following policy from head office. Mm-hmm. So there are all these things to think about. Sometimes professional trustee is the answer. Sometimes a family member. The other option is to say have a family member, and the family member is expected to hire professionals. Then the family member gets to fire the professional if the professional is not doing well. If the professional is charging too high a fee. if the professional is just not performing. Whereas if the professional is the trustee, they're not likely to fire themselves.